All right, so we're diving deep today into Real Madrid's recent loss.
Yeah.
2-1 to Valencia at the Bernabéu. We're going to get into what that means tactically for the rest of their season. And then also look at some of those really controversial refereeing decisions and maybe even figure out who should be talking penalties.
Yeah, sounds good.
By the end of this, you're going to understand everything you need to know about this match.
Absolutely. It was a really interesting game to analyze, and it felt like Valencia, their win was huge for them in their fight to stay up.
Right.
But for Real Madrid, this puts Barcelona in a position to go 6 points clear at the top of the table.
Yeah, I mean, that 6-point gap with the head-to-head already decided.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that do to Real Madrid? Do they have to shift their entire strategy now?
It puts immense pressure on them because every game becomes a must-win, and they have to hope that Barcelona drop points.
Right.
So that just adds an extra layer of pressure.
Yeah. And of course, everyone wants to talk about Ancelotti. What does this loss mean for him? And, your analysis kind of hinted that this isn't the end for him, but it definitely puts him under a lot of pressure.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to look at the broader context. Real Madrid are still in the Champions League.
Right.
They have the Club World Cup coming up.
Yeah.
And I think historically, they've always prioritized success in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can have a good run in the Champions League, then that might ease some of the pressure on Ancelotti domestically.
Interesting.
But yes, obviously, if the results continue to be poor, that's going to increase the pressure.
It really feels like this game was part of a bigger trend. I mean, you even mentioned a succession of bad games with bad play.
Yeah.
Is that more concerning than just a bad day at the office?
Yeah. When you see a pattern of poor performances,
Yeah.
it suggests there might be deeper issues
Right.
than just individual errors.
Yeah.
Maybe it's tactical or maybe it's a dip in confidence.
Yeah.
But Ancelotti needs to figure out what the problem is and fix it quickly.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Valencia. They went to the Bernabéu and got a huge result,
Yeah, they did.
which is obviously massive in their fight to avoid relegation. Tactically, what did they do to frustrate Real Madrid?
They were really defensively disciplined. They probably played in a low block, which made it very difficult for Real Madrid to create chances.
Okay.
And then when they scored that first goal from a set piece, they were able to sit back even more.
Yeah.
And they did a great job of closing down Real Madrid's creative players in midfield.
Which kind of leads us to Real Madrid's defensive issues. 8 goals conceded in the last 3 home games.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on there? That's not normal for them.
It's not normal for them at all.
Oh,
I think
wow.
it's probably a combination of things.
Okay.
Set pieces are clearly a problem.
Right.
Maybe their intensity isn't there defensively. Maybe there are some individual errors creeping in, or maybe the tactics are leaving them a little bit exposed.
Your analysis also mentioned that Real Madrid really struggled to control the midfield in this match. You mentioned that Modric looked exhausted and Valverde wasn't as effective as usual. How important is that midfield battle?
The midfield is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you control the tempo of the game.
Right.
If Modric and Valverde aren't at their best, then the whole team suffers because you're more vulnerable defensively and you can't create as many chances going forward.
Yeah, it seemed like Valencia won that battle pretty convincingly.
They did.
And then there's that recurring problem of set pieces.
Yeah.
Valencia scored their first goal from a corner.
Mm-hmm.
And you even mentioned that Real Madrid has been warned about this before.
They have, yeah. It's a real concern because
Yeah.
if you know about a weakness and you don't fix it, teams are going to keep exploiting it.
Exactly. And it's costing them points.
It is.
So let's get into those key moments in the match and some of the controversies.
Okay.
Diakabi scored early, then Vinícius equalized, and then Vinícius missed a penalty in the 35th minute.
Yeah.
That felt like a real turning point.
It did, because if he had scored that penalty, Real Madrid would have been in the lead.
Right.
And that would have changed the whole dynamic of the game.
Yeah, Valencia would have had to be more attacking.
Exactly.
And it might have opened up some space for Real Madrid.
Yeah, I think that missed penalty really gave Valencia a boost.
And then, of course, Hugo Duro scored the winner later on, which just makes that missed penalty even more painful.
It does.
Now, we've got to talk about this penalty that was given to Real Madrid for the foul on Mbappé.
Yeah.
This is interesting because VAR got involved.
Yeah.
The ref initially gave the penalty, and then he went to the screen, which you said is pretty unusual in Spain.
It is, yeah.
But then he stuck with his original decision, so what's going on there?
I think the idea with VAR is that it should only be used for clear and obvious errors.
Okay.
So if the ref has seen the incident
Right.
and made a decision, then it should be a very high bar to overturn that.
Yeah.
And in this case, the contact on Mbappé, maybe it was a foul, maybe it wasn't. But it probably wasn't a clear and obvious error by the ref.
Yeah, and the fact that he stuck with his decision after reviewing it suggests he still thought it was a penalty.
Exactly.
And then we had another VAR controversy.
We did, yeah, the disallowed goal for Real Madrid.
Yeah, the Diakabi own goal. Mbappe was offside, but then the ref went to the screen to check if he was interfering with play.
Right.
So if the offside is objective because of the technology, why did he need to review it?
Because the offside rule isn't just about a player's position.
Right.
It's also about whether they're actively involved in play.
Okay.
So even though Mbappé didn't touch the ball, the ref had to decide if being offside meant that he was interfering with Diakabi's clearance.
Okay, so that's why he had to go to the screen.
Yeah.
Then there's that potential red card for Sadiq for a stamp on Valverde.
Yeah.
The ref didn't even give a yellow, but you said it could have been a red.
Yeah.
And Valverde had blood on his sock.
He did.
Should VAR have stepped in there?
It's difficult to say without knowing what the VAR saw. If the ref and his assistants had a clear view and decided it wasn't a red card, then VAR should only intervene if it was a really obvious mistake.
Okay.
But if they didn't see it properly, then maybe VAR should have told the ref to take another look.
Yeah, so it's hard to say for sure. Now let's talk about some of the individual performances.
Okay.
You highlighted Mbappe as being a real bright spot for Real Madrid, 14 goals in his last 16 games.
Yeah, he's been incredible.
It seems like even when the team struggles, he still delivers.
He does. He's a real threat in front of goal.
But on the other hand, Vinícius seems to be struggling.
Yeah.
Only 3 goals in 16 games,
Mm-hmm.
and he missed that penalty. Do you think it's a confidence thing?
It could be. Yeah. When you miss
Yeah.
a couple of penalties in a row, it can definitely affect your confidence.
Right.
And confidence is so important for a forward.
It is. And the defense also struggled. You mentioned Fran Garcia and Lucas Vazquez having difficult games. What were they struggling with?
Fullbacks have such a tough job these days because they have to defend and attack. So if they're having a tough time,
Mm-hmm.
it probably means they're being exposed by the opposition's wingers.
Okay.
Maybe they're being caught out of position, or maybe they're losing their one-on-one battles.
Yeah, which puts a lot of pressure on the center backs.
Yeah.
And this kind of brings us back to the whole penalty taker debate.
Yeah.
Vinícius has missed a couple recently.
He has.
And some people are saying that Mbappe should be taking them now because he's the main goal scorer.
It's definitely something to consider. I mean, Vinícius was reliable for a while.
Right.
But if Mbappe is the main man and he's good at penalties,
Yeah.
then maybe it makes sense for him to take over.
Especially in those big games
Yeah.
where every goal is so important. So Ancelotti has some decisions to make.
He does, yeah. The right back position is a problem.
Right.
He needs to decide on a penalty taker.
Yeah.
And you even suggested that Enrique deserves more game time.
Mm.
And of course, he's got that big Champions League game against Arsenal coming up. What do you think he's thinking about in terms of tactics and team selection for that one?
Right.
It's a tricky one because he needs to keep players fresh for that game.
Yeah.
You saw that he rested Rodrigo and Camavinga against Valencia,
Right.
and he even played Rudiger and Tchouaméni at center back, which was a bit of a surprise.
It was, yeah.
So he's got to find a balance between staying competitive in the league
Yep.
and being ready for Europe.
Yeah, he does. And then finally, there's that worrying stat that you highlighted.
Which one's that?
Real Madrid's home form.
Oh, yeah.
Draws against Rayo and Braga, and now this loss to Valencia.
Yeah.
For a club like Real Madrid, that's not good enough.
It's not, the Bernabéu should be a fortress.
Exactly.
They need to turn that around.
So we've gone through everything, the tactics, the controversies, the performances, the decisions that Ancelotti has to make,
Yeah.
all from this one game. It really feels like it was a microcosm of the season so far.
Yeah, it does.
But if you had to pick one thing, the biggest challenge for Real Madrid moving forward, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But
Yeah.
I think it's their mentality.
Okay.
They need to rediscover that belief and that hunger that made them so successful in the past.
Yeah, I think you're right. So there you have it, folks. A deep dive into Real Madrid versus Valencia.
Yeah,
Hopefully you learned something new.
I hope so too.
Now go forth and impress your friends with your football knowledge.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening.